Greetings. Today we're going to be spending a few minutes reading through Psalms chapter 4 and getting some pointers on how we ought to pray. Starting in verse 1. Psalms chapter 4 verse 1 says this: "Answer me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Answer me when I call, O God of my righteousness." When you pray, you must be humble. You must see where you stand in relation to God. Here David says that any righteousness he has in him is God's, not his own. When Martin Luther was lecturing on this particular psalm, he said this, and I quote, "David finds nothing within himself on the basis of which God should answer him." David finds nothing within himself on the basis of which God should answer him. In other words, there's no reason for God to listen to David, and yet he does. In other words, David recognizes the privilege he has in speaking to the Lord and that it is a gift from God. Prayer is a gift from God. Look what he says next. "You have given me relief when I was in distress." Here we see David remembering how God has delivered him in the past. I don't know how many times I've done something special with my boys. I've taken them to the movies or their favorite restaurant or gone to a park they wanted to go to play. And only moments after this is over, we have some kind of ungrateful argument because they're not getting their way in some other situation. And I don't know how many times I or Leah have said something like, "After everything we've done for you today, boys, you're going to whine." The worst is when it happens on Christmas, right? I wonder how many times God has felt that way about me. It's an important practice in prayer to remember the prayers that he has answered, the ways he has moved. Most importantly, to remember the gospel. If he does nothing else for you, the gospel is enough. Is it not? The psalmist continues, "Be gracious to me and hear my prayer." Verse 2. "O men, how long shall you honor me? How long shall my honor be turned into shame? How long will you love vain words and speak after lies? But know that the Lord has set apart the godly for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him." Here David looks to others who do not have faith in God. He has a great concern for them. And he wants them to see the benefit that he has in being able to pray. And so he's going to spend a few verses here instructing them on how to pray. He's asked God to be with him, and now he's saying to these men who don't have faith, okay, listen, I want you to be able to call on him too. And so look at what he says next in verse 4. "Be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent." A great hindrance to good rest and effective prayer is anger that leads to sin. Paul actually quotes this part of Psalms 4 in Ephesians chapter 4 verse 26. He says, if in your anger do not sin, and then he says, "Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry." Here David is saying to take time and ponder and pray about your anger. I have found that after a bit of prayerful and calm reflection, my anger dissipates. Verse 5, "Offer right sacrifices." Now, when David writes this, he's talking about making literal sacrifices to the Lord in order to seek a right relationship with him, right? Sacrificing an animal or something like this. But for you and I, the question is, what do you need to do to make things right with the Lord? Do you need to forgive someone? Apologize to someone? Give up a certain habit or object or relationship that is not honoring him? More often than not, when we read a verse like this, "Offer right sacrifices," we know exactly what God would have us lay down. So lay those things down. He says, offer the right sacrifices in verse 5 and put your trust in the Lord. In prayer, you are removing your trust from all the false gods and you are choosing to trust in the Lord. Verse 6, "There are many who say, 'Who shall show us some good?' Lift up the light of your face upon us, O Lord." People are looking for goodness. They're looking for beauty and meaning in life. Look to God and you will see goodness. Here David prays that God will reveal his goodness. to these people who don't have faith. They're looking for something miraculous. God is right there. If they would only see him. Do you feel that ache for people who don't know God? Verse 7. You have put more joy in my heart. Now he's praying again. You have put more joy in my heart than they have meaning farmers, when their grain and wine abound. You have put more joy in my heart than farmers have when their grain and wine abound. David is declaring how much joy God has put in his heart. What is your source of joy this morning? Do you find your joy in the Lord? A peace and excitement that changing circumstances simply cannot touch. Verse 8, finally. In peace I will both lie down and sleep. For you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. David had many enemies, men who wanted to kill him. People were always scheming and accusing and trying to take advantage of David or remove David. And yet, here he says he could sleep in peace. Why? Because there is no device nor effort of his own making that can protect him. Only God can protect him. In your prayers, recommit to taking your refuge in the Lord. And no matter what, you can rest in ease. Many throughout the years have called this an evening prayer, Psalms 4, and have indeed prayed it before they go to bed at night. Perhaps this is something we ought to do as well. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.